So folks, we're going to begin. Welcome, folks. So my name is Pat Clifford, and I'm our Director of Research and Innovation here at Southlake Regional Health Center, and in particular this physical space, which is Southlake's Innovation Center, Create IT Now. So our innovation center here on the campus of Southlake. So I'm delighted to be here this morning. I'm unfortunately not going to be able to stay all of the morning, so I'm going to kind of pop in and out, try not to be incredibly obvious, and kind of poke my nose in and sit at the back a little bit, and then I'll have to disappear again a couple more times. But it's an absolute delight to be here, and in particular, it's a delight to welcome ventureLAB and the Agile planning seminar that ventureLAB is putting on this morning to here, to Create IT Now, to Newmarket. So normally this event takes place somewhere else, often at ventureLAB in Markham. So it's an absolute delight to have ventureLAB here this morning, to have the event run here this morning, to have the event live streamed this morning. So a whole number of firsts for us, so we're delighted to do that. The other thing that I'd like to do by way of introduction is also to introduce the lady that will be taking you through this morning, and that's Jane Gertner. I'm sure many of you know Jane, but perhaps not all of you do. So Jane is an entrepreneur in residence with ventureLAB and has been with ventureLAB for a period of time. And I say period of time because I don't quite remember the number of years. 8 years, almost 9 years. So a good period of time. And then comes from, previous to that, an industry background, agriculture, food, nutrition, probably a couple of other things I don't know, but has been with ventureLAB obviously for a chunk of time. So I'm going to turn things over to Jane, who will lead you through the morning. I presume there'll be some other introductions going on, and I will sort of float in and out, but welcome. Jane.
Thank you, Pat. As Pat said, I'm Jane Gertner. I'm an executive in residence at ventureLAB. Yeah, well, it's okay.
Oh, she needs. Sorry. I thought she had one. Sorry.
We just need to do a quick switch here. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
Here.
Do you want to do it?
Yeah. Hope it'll fit in here. No, it probably won't. So I don't have other pockets. Pam, I don't know if it'll fit in my pocket. I don't have any other pockets.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay.
Very good.
There we go.
Now,
Don't worry, you won't be on film.
Notice
Just
the
me.
seamless transition,
Yeah.
right?
Yes. That's what editing is. That's what editing is for. Anyway, thank you, Pat. I'm Jane Gertner. I'm an executive in residence at ventureLAB. I actually run our healthcare practice, which basically entails working with our healthcare entrepreneurs to help them commercialize and grow their businesses, as well as working on a number of programs that ventureLAB has in the healthcare area. I have been working in healthcare for about 10 years, but as Pat mentioned, I do have an industry background, and initially in the food business. I've worked for large companies. I've run an SME. I've spent, as CEO, I've spent the majority of my career sitting on your side of the table, so we hope to bring a lot of reality and business experience to this talk. So before I get started, how many of you actually run a small business? How many consider yourself entrepreneurs? Perfect. This talk is very much for you, but it's as relevant for a large hospital like Southlake as it is for a small business, as it is for an educational institution. And I'm going to talk in a second about what Agile planning is, but it's one of those things that if somebody said to you, that old game, if you went to a desert island and you could only take one thing with you, what would it be? From a business perspective, today, this is what it would be. It would be the Agile planning process. And Agile planning is a process that has a toolkit, and we're going to talk about the toolkit. It's also a culture. It's also a mindset. It's all about being flexible in today's world to make sure that you can meet the changing demands of technology and the speed at which the world changes. The old days of actually having a business plan that you spent 6 months, in the planning process doing, it's 40 or 50 pages long and sitting on your shelf are long over. So Agile planning is very much a toolkit, and it's very much a survival skill, and it's something that every business needs today to really move forward. So just a little context before we talk about the toolkit. This is called the internet century. The 21st century is all about the internet, and it's no secret that technology is transforming absolutely every sector. What's true today that wasn't true even 3 or 4 years ago is basically all of the world's information is now online. There is total connectivity from your phone to your tablet to your PC, and not only do people have this individually, it's happening around the world. So the entire world is basically connected. And what's even more amazing is that that smartphone that you have in your pocket actually has more computing power than an IBM supercomputer had 10 years ago. So everyone is part of the technology revolution, and it is changing at an ever increasing speed, which is really known as exponential change. So how do you survive in this world? Well, right now, disruptions are the new normal. Barriers to entry to businesses, and we're going to talk about a number of those businesses, soon are just melting away. It used to take years and years of planning to plan a business, get all your products ready, get your facilities ready if you have manufacturing or if you're making a medical device, find manufacturers, and then months and months of planning about how you're going to get to market. This now happens in mere months. And more interesting, business models are just breaking faster and faster. Who remembers now, Kodak, Napster, things that were everyday, household names and organizations, business models, year on year, gone and being replaced by other things. But what's even more interesting is that power is actually shifting to both the consumer and small, nimble teams. It's amazing how many large organizations are now having small teams within there to look at and make change. As a matter of fact, you're sitting in the middle of Create IT Now, at Southlake Hospital, which has an innovation team, which is charged with looking at new innovations, in the healthcare space and finding ways to test those and get them adopted faster if they make sense at the hospital. So every organization, large and small, has teams of people that are dedicated to innovation and making things happen quicker, even within larger, more established structures. What's more amazing is the speed of light of what can happen and how fast it can happen. This is a very, very interesting chart. Here's the number of years, 2 to 20 years, and along here, the years some of these, what we call exponential organizations, were introduced. Well, way back when, a typical Fortune 500 company took 20 years to become a $1 billion company. Google, launched in 1998, actually took 9 years to become a $1 billion company. If you start moving over here, Uber, 2009, 3 years to have a market value of $1 billion. And more currently, companies like Oculus Rift, Snapchat, which most people have heard of, 2011, just mere year to get to $1 billion. So the market is changing so rapidly. How do you survive as a small company in this environment when a company could start out and a year and a half later they're worth $1 billion and they've created a whole new category? So what we're seeing is that new business models and new ecosystems are constantly emerging. Google created a market and an entire ecosystem that didn't exist before they came out. Sorry, I don't know what. Okay. Uber, no secret. They've created an entire transportation industry that didn't exist and basically turned the traditional taxi industry right on its ear. Amazon has created a model as well as a network of organizations, and some of you may even work with Amazon in your small business and supply your products through Amazon. They've created, again, an entire ecosystem that did not exist before. So the entire landscape has changed, and it shifts on an ongoing basis, and even more so, fields are converging together. Healthcare and technology created healthcare IT. Clean tech, environmental and technology created an industry, the clean tech industry, that did not exist before. New industries are popping up all the time, even art and technology, digital media and healthcare. There are now digital art programs for art, therapy that are offered within healthcare institutions. So how you view the industry you're in, how you view your competition, and how you look at how you're going to grow your business has just changed dramatically, because all of these fields just continue to converge together and create new markets and bring with them new competitors that didn't exist before that can get to market at the speed of light. So how does a business, survive? In this era of exponential growth, a couple of interesting statistics. Airbnb versus traditional hotels. They have 90 more listings per employee than Sheraton hotels worldwide. This took a mere 2 years to happen. If you look at, Tesla Automotive, has everybody heard of Tesla? Huge success story, because they basically turned the model for making cars, selling cars, and the kind of cars they develop right on its ear. So they have 30 times more value per employee than General Motors. So the world just keeps changing at this incredible exponential pace. And just take a quick peek at the future, and one of our favorite quotes, that entrepreneurs are the crazy people who work 100 hours a week so they don't have to work 40 hours for someone else. Does that resonate with everyone? What do entrepreneurs do and just to peek at the future? Not only is the present changing at an ever, rapid rate, look what the future brings. There's robotics that, and I'm sure, Pat can attest to that may change, the way certain services and therapies are delivered, in a healthcare environment. Drones, they used to be for the military. They're dropping packages, at people's doors, and all sorts of other things, and artificial intelligence, deep machine learning, that is going to also change the way business is done and the speed in which it's done. In healthcare, genomics and personalized medicine, also just changing the way healthcare has delivered. So when you then start thinking about your businesses and start thinking about how is my world going to change, how are these trends going to impact what I do and how I view my business and plan out the future, we're going to talk about some of the tools you can use to help cope and grow and strengthen your company in an environment like this. So just, a little more quick background before we jump into the toolkit. Exponential innovation is just, a global phenomenon. Computer power right now is doubling every 18 months, and it's expected to for the next 40 years. Every field, every business, it doesn't matter what industry you're in, that has leveraged computer power has started to double in size every 1 to 2 years. So the good news is markets are growing, opportunities are growing. The real challenge is how are you going to take advantage of those opportunities, because they are basically disrupting every single industry. So if your venture's not doubling in value every year, and doubling is awful nice from a growth perspective. People used to say, well, gee, my target for next year is I want to grow 1%. I want to grow 2%, and we're going to be happy. We're going to be so successful. We're going to have such a wonderful business. In the new world of exponential change, if you're not doubling in size every year, you're falling behind the market. And the real challenge is, how do you do that? How do you plan for the future when the future could be completely different 6 months from now? On top of that, the barriers to innovation are low. Virtually all the market data that used to be proprietary information is easy to access online. You can also learn how to make anything online. There's virtually nothing you can't learn how to make online. You can use design tools online, or has anybody heard of Fiverr? Mm-hmm. Yeah, which is a tool that enables you to actually hire somebody very quickly and very cheaply to make something for you. You can go to your local library now, right here in Newmarket. You can go to your local library. You can go to virtually any large local library now and get free 3D printing that you can actually make a prototype of a product. You can create your product design and offer your product on Indiegogo, which is a crowdfunding site. Has everybody seen Indiegogo or heard of crowdfunding? You could raise enough money to be in business a month from now. Literally, have a prototype, know how to get it at your library, raise money equitably online, and there you are. Poof, you're in business. And you can open a store on eBay or Amazon through their affiliate programs and do it globally. 2 months, you have a simple product. You're in business, but so is your competitor. And even more daunting, it's not limited to age, education, location. There's no age threshold for innovation. Has anybody heard of the Classy Cyborgs? These are our youngest client. They are in grade school, some of these. These are our youngest client at ventureLAB. As a matter of fact, they're from Aurora. They are a team of students, middle school students, grade school, middle school students from the first LEGO League of Aurora. First LEGO League is a global organization that is supported by LEGO that is for science and technology, engineering, and mathematics students. It is an extracurricular program, and this team from Aurora, from a variety of schools in Aurora, actually was the only Canadian team to go to the World Global Finals for the first LEGO League, and they have developed a product for the blind to help teach them to read Braille. It's for blind children that also has games built in. Not only were they successful, they decided to be passionate about becoming entrepreneurs. They are commercializing this product. They have received funding, they have incorporated, they have an organization. York University Faculty of Engineering has developed their product, and they've reached the point of having a minimum viable product. They are well on their way to market. Who would have thought your competition might be in grade school today? So there are no barriers to innovation. So, finally, what are you going to do about it? What tools are available to you, and how should you approach your business to succeed in this kind of environment? And that's really what Agile planning is all about. So let's start with the first hypothesis behind Agile planning. Business plans are obsolete. Does anybody disagree with that? Besides the fact you don't like to write them because they're not fun, and I've written a lot of business plans, they are not fun. Besides the fact you don't like to write them, does anybody disagree that they're obsolete? So one of our favorite quotes is from Mike Tyson that basically says everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. And I think anybody that's got a small business and has been out there talking to customers will know that that is true. This is the way things used to be done. When I started in business, and I started in marketing many years ago, and we would develop products and launch them in huge secrecy. I worked for an organization that if you left a piece of paper on your desk at night, it would be confiscated when the CEO walked through the office, just because you never know when a competitor might be there and find out what you're doing. And we spent years planning these products and deciding what they'd look like, what they taste like, what color they were, because we knew ourselves, just never getting out of the office, we knew what our customers wanted. And then we would launch it years later to spend huge amounts of money getting ready to do this, and then found out it wasn't exactly what they wanted. We needed to change this aspect of it or that aspect of it or market it a different way. And that's how business used to be done. That's not how it's done anymore. People don't sit in isolation, plan, make assumptions about their customers, and spend all sorts of money, and then find out they weren't entirely right, because that's just not efficient in today's world, and it's not fast enough, and it's not accurate enough. I don't know, has anybody heard of Steve Blank? Because we're going to talk a fair bit about him. He's one of the founders of the Lean Startup movement that we're going to talk about as an important part of your toolkit for surviving in this environment. And one of his favorite quotes, and I think anybody that's been out there talking to a customer would agree, that business plans rarely survive the first contact with a customer. Because if you do it all in isolation the first time you talk to a customer and show it to them, they'll say, gee, that's wonderful, but I wish you would have talk to me about this sooner because I would really like it better if it looked like this or it looked like that, or if your service offering was a bit different. So both of these things, very important. Don't plan in isolation, and make sure you get your customer feedback well before you launch. And we're going to talk about what tools are available and what techniques are available to go about doing that, to make sure you get all the information you need to move your business forward. So I mentioned the Lean Startup before, and the Lean Startup, has anybody heard of the book? There's actually a number of very famous books written about the Lean Startup. Whoa. I don't know where that came from. Sometimes smart boards aren't so smart, because that was not in the presentation. Don't know where that came from. Okay, so we're going to go back to the Lean Startup. The Lean Startup is about 10 years. It's about 10 years old, and it was developed for startups, but it's not really just for startups. It's a way of thinking and a way of approaching anything you're doing, whether you have an existing business and you're looking at adding new products or services, or you're just looking at getting more customer input behind what you do. It is relevant for you. Companies as big as IBM use the Lean Startup when they're looking at doing new things. Most startups, that want to get to market quickly and efficiently use the Lean Startup methodology and toolkit as well to make sure they're doing all the right things as effectively and efficiently as they can. So the Lean Startup, of course, started in Silicon Valley about 10 years ago, when not long after the tech crash, when everyone said there's got to be a better way. There's got to be a better and smarter way to measure this and do it a little bit more methodically and try to use your money, because people were raising huge amounts of money back then, spending it all up front on faith, launching their products, losing their money, and a lot of companies didn't succeed. So everybody got together and said, got to be a better way. And the Lean Startup was the first sort of toolkit and methodology to say this can be measured, this can be done a little bit more methodically. So what it is a framework and processes for agile planning and how to cope in this world of exponential change. What it tells you is very counterintuitive to everything our parents ever told us, because I bet my parents certainly never said to me, fail early and fail often. They said, don't fail at all. What's wrong with you if you fail? You didn't do this right. The new thinking about this is fail early and fail often. And what that means is the earlier you know what's working and not working for you, the more effective you're going to be, because you learn from those failures. You learn quickly, and you can then turn around and understand how to do it properly. So fail early, fail often is a very important part of the Lean Startup, because it basically reduces the cost of failure and speeds your path to market. So a couple of things about the Lean Startup mentality. It's all about planning less and experimenting more. So you don't sit and plan for 6 months and then go out and launch something. You plan a little bit, you go out and test what you've learned, you experiment, you get some feedback, you learn what worked, what didn't work, you fine-tune a bit, you go out and do it again. So it's just something that's called iterative, which means you go round and round, that you build something, whether it's an idea or a product, go out and get some feedback so you can measure it. You can talk to a number of people, and we'll talk about how you do that, and get some feedback on it and get some measurements, learn from it, and just keep doing it again and again so you get it right. So when you go to market, your chances of success are far, far greater than they would have been to do it the other way. So it's based on real customer feedback over intuition. It's based on iterative design over full-scale development. And what that means is, just as we talked about, build something, whether it's a small version of a product or a smaller version of your idea, go out and get some feedback, learn, and continue on that same loop. And it's all about beta testing over major launches, which really means pick a customer or two to try this with. Once you think you've got it right, try it with a small group of customers before you go out and spend all sorts of money developing a final product, all sorts of marketing and sales money and going to trade shows, however you're going to get your product out there, try it out first. So basically what this does is minimize your time through that whole continuous loop of getting it right. So what do you do to do this? There is a toolkit, as I had alluded to earlier, of how you do that. The first one is taking this series of untested hypotheses or guesses about what you think is right and capturing it on a business model canvas. Has anybody seen or done a business model canvas here?
I've seen it.
Yeah, has anybody done one? No, I actually have, I think I have one. If not, I have one on the screen, and we can talk about how you do it, what it looks like, what you're capturing. Another thing is the second part of that three-part toolkit is test your thinking using the customer development process. What is the customer development process? It's getting out and talking to customers, but in a structured way, and we'll talk about how you do that, what you're looking for, how you might ask for this information. So the second piece is getting outside, talking to your customers, better known as customer development. And the third part, which sounds complicated and isn't, is called Agile engineering, to build a prototype. And what that really means is what we talked about earlier. Build something small, even if it's just a storyboard that shows what you want to do, and you can show it to people and get some feedback, or a very minimum version of your product to go get some feedback. So Agile engineering is start small, get some feedback, and continue building through that feedback. So again, it's being flexible in the development of your product until you get it right. So let's talk about the first tool, a business model canvas. And I've got larger pictures of it that we can take a look at. What a business model canvas, what a business model really does is talk about how you will create value for your customers and make money for yourself. And really that's what a business model is about. A business model canvas is a piece of paper. It is literally a piece of paper or a tool that helps you visually capture that thinking. And I've got lots of pictures of it, and I have some live examples of it that I can show you and share with you. It's built all around the customer, and it's a simple visual tool that helps give you some clarity and alignment. We'll take a much quicker look, bigger look at it. This is the business model canvas. It's got 9 boxes, and it's divided into 2 sides. The right-hand side is all about the customer, and everything is built around the customer, because who you're creating value for is your customer. Your value proposition, has everybody heard the word value proposition? So you all know what that is, which is really the value you create for your customer, all about your customer. So everything on this side of the business model canvas is all about your customer. Customer segments, who your customer is, customer relationships, how you're going to serve them, and I'll give an example in a second. The channels, about how you're going to reach them and how you're going to generate revenue from them. So the right-hand side of the canvas is all about the customer. The left-hand side is all about how you're going to deliver that value to the customer. So it's all about your organization. What kind of things do you need to do in the next little while to make sure you can deliver that to the customer? Key activities, key resources. What kind of resources do you need, whether it's money, people, patents, trademarks? What kind of resources do you as a company need to deliver that to the customer, and who might be appropriate partners to do that? And we'll talk a little bit more about some of these ideas. So again, right-hand side is all about the value proposition and the customer. Left-hand side is all about your organization and how you're going to support that to them. Where these 9 boxes actually came from is a lot of research that had been done in the lean startup on the business model canvas about what elements were critical to a business model. But I want to step back. Does everybody know what a business model is? Because it's fundamental to the business model canvas. And just a couple of examples of business models, probably one of the simplest ones, the banking world. For years and years, we had 5 big traditional banks. They have retail banking services, they have credit cards, they have high net worth individual services where they have, a wealth division where they highly service those people who, have a lot of money to invest in, that they want to have a one-on-one relationship with, and they have a lot of retail locations to serve their customers. That's one business model of a bank. Many years ago, PC Financial came in and said, we think there's a whole new model. I don't think everybody wants a bank that looks like that. Maybe there's a lot of people that want a bank where you can bank online. They don't need to change money. They don't need to come to see a teller. They don't need special, 15 different types of credit cards. One credit card will do. We can charge way lower fees, not have any branches, and have a bank. That's a business. That too is a business model. That is how they chose to serve a certain segment of customers, creating a certain kind of value, and doing it mostly online versus a traditional bank. So those are kind of examples. Uber and taxis, again, examples of transportation models, very, very different models of transportation, as is Airbnb, a very different model for the hospitality industry. So that's what a business model is, because that is fundamental to doing a business model canvas, is understanding what kind of business model you're going to have versus those that your competitors have. Does that make sense to everybody? Because it's very fundamental to actually doing a business model canvas is understanding the idea and differences in different types of business models. So as I said, there's the customer side, and then the operation side of how you're going to, which is over here, how you're going to deliver that. Value proposition, which we quickly touched on before, is really where the rubber hits the road. It's the fit between your solution and the customer's needs. And what you're looking for is to get out there and find how these two puzzle pieces fit perfectly together. Are you solving a big customer problem, and is your product actually solving that need? So where do you start? How do you go about doing this, and how do you take this daunting piece of paper and start making some sense about it for your business? So you start with a blank business model canvas and start filling in all those boxes yourself. When you're a new business or you're launching a new product, everything on there is a hypothesis. It's your best guess, but you're the best person to take that first stab at your best guess. And then you start adapting it using feedback, developing your product, which will then give you the confidence to scale it when you nail it. So this is where you start. You take a blank business model canvas, you fill in the boxes. Day one, these are all question marks, because you don't know. These are the things you have to go out and talk to customers and start adapting. So what does one really look like? Here is a blank business model canvas that was actually filled in. This is a real client. This was done about one of the very first business model canvases I think I ever worked on with a client about 6 years ago in the medical device business. They were launching a sensor device back in the early years of sensor devices, and we took our best guess. And where do you start? You always start, it's all about the customer. So you start with doing the customer segments first. The reason these are in different colors, because business model canvas is a very visual tool, and where people find it very valuable is you can see your entire business model at a glance. The reason these are in different colors is they're different business segments. This company thought they'd have 5 different business segments, right from selling to hospitals, to possibly selling a private label product, to possibly licensing it to other segments. So each one of those is in a different color. The reason why these are in different colors is they are these value propositions, which is the second box you do, because it's all about the customer and how you create value, and then you start filling in the other boxes. These are in different colors because they are actually color coordinated to those customer segments. Because if you think about your own business, if you have a number of different business segments, they often have very different value propositions. How you create value, go back to our bank example, how a bank creates value for you and I as a retail customer is very different than how they create value for a high net worth individual. Those value propositions would be completely different. So you capture your value proposition for that customer segment, same color. Many times you might find, sometimes across customer segments, and we see this all the time, there's the same value proposition. You may create value the same way for 2 or 3 customer segments and differently for one. So you would just capture that on here. You may have only one value proposition, and the way you create value for all your customer segments is the same, but this is the exercise that you go through. And then I'm going to show you another canvas for company we've all heard of, so you can see what one looks like and how simple it is. And then you start filling in these other customer boxes. Anything that's in black on here is because it's common to all of the segments. So you see when you put this together, you can tell very quickly at a glance exactly what your business model looks like by customer type. But I will say this was our first go at it. This company, because of all the regulatory and the time it takes to get to market in medical devices, took about 4 years to get to market. This bears, I can honestly say, 0 resemblance to the business model this company took to market. Because they learned, they tested, they tried, they developed their product. As a matter of fact, their initial work was done right here at Southlake Hospital in a pilot that they were working with clinicians to get feedback on, because hospitals are one of their business segments. But when they went to market, I don't think there is one thing on here that actually turned out to be what the company did, because they did it right. They went in with a set of assumptions, a very minimum product. They sat down with their customer, who are the actual clinical people that are using this product on patients, got feedback, changed their product, learned more about the other segments of the market that they thought were their customers and how they added value. By the time they were ready to launch, they got it right. But it was a very iterative learning process, but you have to start somewhere. So they did. We took our best guess at what we believed at that point in time our customers would be, what the product would be, how we would add value, how we were going to get it there, which partners we needed, and we learned along the way that virtually none of those assumptions were true, but by the time they finished this, they had something that made sense, and they knew who their customers were and had a much greater chance of being successful in the marketplace. So let's take a look at Apple, something everybody knows. This is a business model canvas for Apple Music. So this goes back many, many years when Apple first went into the music business. And for those of us that remember the market like it used to be, there was a huge problem before Apple went into the music business. There was somebody called Napster who was basically giving music away for free. The recording artists and the entire industry were up in arms because they thought they were losing all sorts of money. They were losing control over the artists. They were losing control over their fees, and they were worried. They were really worried about the profitability of the industry. When Apple launched their first iPod for the music business, they solved a massive, massive problem. They did something wonderful for you and I because they changed the entire music industry, but where they really created value in the end was for the industry itself. They were, and their partners, and they were solving a massive, massive financial problem. And basically changed the music industry. But if we take a look at this in its simplest form, so you can see what a business model canvas really looks like, and this was their going in canvas. Who's our market? Everybody. Anybody that likes listening to music. The mass market. How do we create value? What's our value proposition? Basically, you can get a seamless music experience. How are we going to get it to people? Well, we have apple.com, we have Apple stores, we have an iTunes store, we have retail stores. That's their channels. How are they going to make money? They're going to sell hardware, and they were going to get some music revenue. Who were they going to partner with? Record companies, original equipment manufacturers, et cetera. What kind of things did they have to do? What were the activities they had to do to get to market? They had to design the iPod. They had to come up with a big marketing program. They had to hire people. So then we take a look at this other box. What kind of resources did they need? Well, what kind of resources were critical? People to do it, the Apple brand, and the meaning and the growth of the Apple brand, having the hardware, having the software. What were their big cost buckets? This is the cost box here. Well, it's people. making the product, making the iPod, and getting it out there to customers. So I hope this gives you sort of a better visual example of what goes on a business model and the kinds of things you need to think about when you're creating your first business model canvas. And simplicity is certainly key, as you can see from when we went back to this. It's very simple, it's very visual, and it really only talks about the important things. And because it is a visual tool, this is actually the Classy Cyborgs business model canvas, which we love, because not only is there real solid thought and content here, they took the meaning of the word visual to another level. They actually drew their business model canvas, and you look at it and you know exactly what they're trying to do, and it's a very, very visual tool. And this is their business model canvas. So then what do you do after that? How do you go out and find out if all of these assumptions are true or not true? And one of the things Steve Blank, who was one of the founders of this movement, loves to say is, there are no facts inside the building, there are only opinions, yours and mine. So get the heck outside and find out what the people who are going to buy your product, your customers, really think. But what you're looking for, and let's go back to the Apple example, is you want to find a hair on fire problem, not a nice to have problem. The Apple example of music and why they were so successful, beyond the fact that Apple are brilliant marketers, but this was a long time ago when they were not nearly as strong as they are today, is they solved a real hair on fire problem. The profitability of the music industry and the ability of artists to collect royalties for the work they were doing was a massive, massive problem. They weren't just building something that was a little, the old better, cheaper, faster of, is your product, what's your product advantage? It has to be a real advantage, and you have to be solving a real problem that matters to your customer. And we like to call those hair on fire problems because they are critical, and people are willing to spend money and change the way they do things to fix that problem. And that's what's critical when you're looking at the business model canvas and your value proposition. Are people willing to spend money and change the way they do things to fix the problem? Is the problem that significant? And you should always ask yourself that as you're going out to solve that problem. So customer discovery, that's about going out and finding out, getting outside, as Steve Blank said, and finding out if what you think and what you hypothesize on your business model canvas is really true. So as we said earlier, your first business model is just the start. It's your hypothesis. You want to continue to iterate it, go around that loop, that build, measure, learn, as you're finding out and getting feedback, and also know that it's rare to get it right out of the gate. As you saw from the medical device business model canvas I showed you, there wasn't one thing on there that turned out to be true, yet this company was able to go through the process several times and develop a product that customers want and solve a really big problem in the marketplace and give themselves the greatest chance of success. So there's 4 stages of the customer development process. The first one is called customer discovery. That's the phase everybody's in, and it's the longest phase when you're trying to find out if those first thoughts and hypotheses on your business model canvas are true. Because you want to get out there and discover what's the problem, is it big, is it meaningful, is it real, and is my product potentially going to satisfy that need? So this phase takes the longest, and it's the most critical. The second phase is customer validation. When you're getting out there, you might have changed a few things along the way that you learned here. You're getting out there and you're starting to sell to a few early customers who are now using your product and getting feedback. This is a long phase 2. These 2 are for much later when you're out there building your business, scaling it, and spending more money against it. But you're still out there collecting feedback. You're still out there learning how to scale your business properly. But the real learning goes on here before you get to market in a big way, to make sure your business model is correct, to make sure your product is correct, and to make sure you're solving real customer problems. So as I said earlier, these are the 2 critical ones. This is the time when you might pivot. Does everybody know what a business pivot is? That's basically when you get feedback from your customers that something in your business model or your product needs to be changed. We're going to talk a bit more about pivoting, and perhaps you need to head down a slightly different path. So I want to talk about pivoting for a second. I got a little quiz here for you guys. Because pivoting used to be viewed by people as a bad thing. I did something wrong and I got to change. In this whole world of fail early, fail often, it's a great thing. It means you've learned something, it's not too late to fix it, you can head down a different path and come out stronger the other way. It's a very positive thing, and so many companies have spent sometimes a year or 2 years that are now large companies perfecting this model because they got out there, they found out what customers wanted early, they were able to change it, they were able to then grow again and start scaling and become the successful companies they are today. So my little quiz, who are these companies now? And this was their real name. TuneIn, Hookup, it was a video dating site. Does anybody know who that is? That was their real name, and they spent 18 months in this format. You can't answer that. You're not allowed to answer that. Does anybody else know who that is? Believe it or not, this is YouTube. They actually started life as a video dating site. So what they found out, what YouTube found out was people really loved the video capabilities that they were providing, but nobody wanted another dating site. So they did a lot of talking to customers and looking at what problems they might be solving, and dating wasn't it, but they really did very well with their video capabilities. So they basically reconfigured, renamed themselves, and launched as YouTube, and everyone knows what's happened since, but this is who they were for the first 18 months. Okay, number 2, Friendster Yellow Pages, an automated system to email recommendation requests to friends. Anybody know who that is? Very good, you're the first person that's ever got that right, without me sitting in front of a computer and trying to Google it. So I can watch all of you and know that you can't do that. So yeah, that was Yelp. But what they, again, another key aspect and learning from pivoting is what was good, what should we keep, what do we need to get rid of, and what do we move? So what they did was keep, the recommendations to friends portion of what people liked about what they were doing, and they then came out and fine-tuned and pivoted and changed their business model, changed their product, and relaunched, changed their name, fortunately, to Yelp, and launched as they are today and built their business. How about this one? The Point, a platform for mobilizing groups for causes. Anybody know who that is? Believe it or not, that's Groupon. They actually started life as a social enterprise, and what people liked about what they were doing was the platform for mobilizing groups. That part of their value proposition and product worked very, very well, but they took a step back and said, what problem are we really solving? What product should we really be marketing? And relaunched as Groupon, again, mobilizing groups, but for discounts. The cause became a for-profit cause of mobilizing groups to get discounts. And at the time was a very, very innovative business model when they first launched. So that was Groupon. Last one, and this was truly their name, Confinity Plus X, a means to exchange money via Palm Pilots. Yeah, that's how long PayPal's actually been around. But they started as a money exchange, but via a hardware tool that obviously didn't have a bright future. So they started as a money exchange, and that was something that consumers really liked. And they reconfigured, rethought, retested, and reemerged, as PayPal, which has gone on to be a huge success story. So the point being, you're the best people right now to get out there, put on your business model canvas all your hypotheses, what you think is correct, what you think your product is, how you think you create value, what problems you think you're solving for the customer, but you really need to go out there. You really need to get that feedback. You really need to get that understanding so that you can learn, pivot if necessary, and reemerge, reevaluate, redevelop, and go on to be a huge success. So pivoting now is a good thing. It's part of the learning process. It's part of understanding your customer and reemerging as a stronger and more viable company. And every one of these has gone on to be very successful at a point in time. But the other important point about pivoting is it also doesn't mean take every single thing you've done and throw it out the window. Every one of these companies had something that was integral to what their product was and what their value proposition was that customers liked. Every one of them kept the parts that were good. They looked at what wasn't working, they rejigged it, went back out to customers, gained that understanding again, and reemerged as a stronger company. So it doesn't mean start over. It means keep what works, learn what doesn't work, and continue to strengthen what you're doing. So I'm just going to talk for a second about minimum viable products, which is the third tool in the toolkit, which was don't go out there and spend a fortune, build your final product and launch it. Go out there and find out what customers think. And this is one of my very favorite quotes from the founder of LinkedIn that says, if you're not embarrassed by the first version of your product, you've launched too late. And this is a really hard thing for entrepreneurs to actually do, because we hear this every day when we say, get out there and get some feedback on your product. The usual response we get from clients is, but I'm not ready to show it to anybody yet. It doesn't quite look right. My screenshots aren't good enough, or the functionality isn't what it needs to be. I really am not ready yet. Remember this. You're trying to just get some feedback. You're trying to learn if you're solving a customer problem, and if the product you can show them will give them some idea of how you're going to do that. If you want to do that, get out there and do it before you spend too much money and before it's too late. It doesn't have to be perfect to get out there first and get that early feedback. We have a real live example of this today, since we have a box of donuts over there. This is my favorite slide. So think about those donuts and eat a donut. What is a minimum viable product? The plain donut versus the sprinkled donut. They're still both donuts. This is just the minimum version that represents what a donut is. Does that give everybody a good idea what a minimum viable product is? It's not inferior. It's not something you should be embarrassed to show people. It is just the bare minimum of what you actually can show to represent what your idea is to get some early feedback. So imprint the slide and remember the donut. It is not inferior. It is just bare bones. So I'm just going to talk very quickly, because this is really for companies that are into scaling and making sure they spend their money wisely, the last two phases of customer development. It's for companies that have gone through this get out there, develop your product, get some customer feedback, pivot, get out there and do it again, and get a few early customers phase. You're heading into customer creation, and it's really about creating more demand and driving it through your sales channel. So it's when you're much further along and you're ready to really start building your business. And the last part is when you're really building a larger company behind it organizationally to support that. So the customer development process follows you as you're building your company into different stages, but what it's trying to say is at every one of these stages you're still out there talking to your customer. Never lose sight about the fact that you're solving a customer problem and you're creating value for your customer at every stage of the evolution of your organization. So I just want to talk very quickly before we wrap up about some critical skills for the future as well, because you're building an organization for the future, but you have to have the culture and the skills to support it if you're going to make innovation and customer discovery and getting customer feedback part of what your company is. You really need to start thinking about solving problems differently. You really need to start collaborating and working with your customers and possibly creating some things together through co-creation. You really need some agility, as we've been talking a lot about today, and a whole lot of courage to make this happen and survive. You know, in today's incredibly fast-pacing period of exponential change and disruptive innovation. So, you know, for new, you know, some quick conclusions that new entrepreneurs are coming from all around, even from grade school. They're coming from fields that you never thought you might compete with because so many fields are converging together. You know, companies are applying business models that are better, faster, and possibly cheaper than yours. There are companies who are getting to market, you know, and becoming worth $1 billion in a year. That is fast change, and you're competing in this environment. You might be on the top of your market today, but you really need to keep looking out there and pivoting and understanding what's going on to make sure that your business model, your product, and your organization really are flexible enough to adapt to that. And as the market doubles, you know, a great goal would be to look at doubling your business every year. So, to conclude, good fortune with your venture, and would love to chat with you about any questions anybody has. And I hope that was helpful. Any thoughts? Overwhelming? Anybody going to do anything different when they walk out of here today? What? If so, what?
So my questions have to do with what sorts of resources you recommend. So you've given us a great introduction.
And that's all it is, was a view from above.
And that's great. So in terms of getting like the business model canvas, I know it's easy to kind of recreate that, but to put
It's
all of
hard
those,
to do.
right,
I
to
have.
put all of those, because you talk about it as a toolkit, so where do you recommend
There
you go
is,
for?
well, there are workshops on business model canvas. There are a number of them, and I even think, because I know you and I chatted earlier about the small business enterprise centers, they're offered all over the place. If you want to take a first stab at doing this yourself, this is what it's an open source document. The website's on the bottom, businessmodelgeneration.com. They can be printed right off the site. It's all open source work, so it's all available online. So we know the small business enterprise centers use those. We use them at ventureLAB, and I think we talked about I chatted with some of you earlier. Our client base is technology companies in healthcare, clean tech, and information technology world. If you're, so we do that through ventureLAB for people who are clients and potentially clients of ours. But the small business centers offer a lot of business model canvas workshops as well. There's a huge number of tutorials online about how to do them. If you actually Google business model canvas and you Google Steve Blank and Eric Ries, it's R-I-E-S, who's heavily involved in the business model canvas as well. There are videos galore about, how to do them box by box. There's a tremendous amount of information on it.
I have a question around customer validation. What is the critical number of customers that you should be?
That's a great question, right?
Before you make that decision to pivot?
I'll
Because you get a lot of different feedback.
Yes, you will.
You could be pivoting on a daily basis.
No, it's a fabulous question, and we go back to that little build, measure, learn. It says measure for a reason because there's metrics. The measure is meant to convey metrics. In Steve Blank's world, he says, because they run a 2-week boot camp for entrepreneurs, and they actually have to go out and speak to 100 customers in 2 weeks, but that's an intensified. They say 50 to 100. We often, in the workshop series that we run at ventureLAB, tell people at least 25. What you don't want is exactly what you said. Talk to the first 3 people. One of them trashes it to say, yeah, it's good, and you say, okay, now what do I do? You are looking to collect data points and opinions if the questions are asked in a structured and similar way to everyone, because you want to collect viewpoints on the same information so you're making a good decision. What you are looking for is enough, which is more than 15, that will give you some that are going in the same direction to say, does this, of your target customers, of your target customer segment, to give you some sense that maybe you need to start thinking differently and get out there, rather than changing your product, get out there and start talking to people again about some of the changes they recommended, and would this make sense, would that make sense, before you run off and do things. But the whole lean startup is based on metrics and statistics. It was all developed to help measure, to create measurements, even if they were qualitative discussions that you can then continue to collect data on the feedback you get to say, I need enough of that to be confident that I'm doing the right thing, or that I need to change. So again, it isn't about just opinions, it's about collecting a statistically significant number of the same opinions to give you the confidence that you need to look differently. So it's a great question, because that's really important. You're not looking to talk to 3 people, and even if 3 of them say change it, to say I'm going to throw out everything I've done, because you don't want to do that. You want to speak to enough people to have the confidence you're making a change for the right reasons. And then you want to go out there and test what you've learned to make sure the change you're making is something that is also in the right direction.
So you've spoken to these 25 people. Are you using your MVP to be validated?
If you have it.
If you have it.
If you have it.
And when do you take the call of moving into a prototype? Not even product, just a prototype.
Well, it also depends on what business you're in and how much that prototype will cost you to do and how long it will take you to build it. In some businesses, you can go to a 3D printer in a library and make something very, very quickly. In others, it takes $100,000 to make, or more, to make a change. So the more expensive your product is, the more confidence you want to head in the right direction. So you'd want to talk to more people and show them pictures and do a real early version of, or even just film part of, something you put together yourself to say this is how it'll work, this is what it'll look like, whatever you can do to get some representation of it before you spend a lot of money. Because some products are very cheap to make prototypes of, and some are very, very expensive, especially in the healthcare field. So you do want some level of confidence. Anybody else? Thank you so much for coming. I hope you all found it interesting, and I hope